In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, family, and welcome to another episode of American Black and White. I am your host, Charles King. Tonight on American Black and White, we welcome a man whose life story is a testament to discipline, courage, and the transformative power of leadership rooted in service. In a world where violence, instability, and uncertainty continues to challenge our communities, there are individuals who rise above the noise. Individuals who dedicate their lives to building safer environments, stronger organizations, and more resilient people. Lorenzo G. Hopkins is one of those individuals. A retired federal law enforcement leader, a retired military veteran, a master strategist in violence prevention and intervention, a leadership architect who has spent more than 3 decades shaping systems, guiding teams, and empowering individuals to rise above their circumstances. From the battlefield to federal service, from community supervision to organizational transformation, Mr. Hopkins has lived a life defined by purpose. His work is not theoretical, it is lived, tested, and proven. And through Northstar Coaching, LLC, he continues to guide leaders, organizations, and communities toward clarity, resilience, and excellence. Tonight, we explore his journey from growing up in a community impacted by the crack epidemic to serving in the Army and Air Force to leading high-risk containment strategies at the federal level to becoming a national voice in leadership development and violence prevention. This is a conversation about service, about discipline, about transformation, and about the kind of leadership our communities desperately needed. Let's begin and let's welcome Lorenzo Hopkins to the show.
Hey, good morning. How are you this evening?
Hey, I'm great.
I'm trying to get this camera to cooperate. It was just on. But anyway, thank you for having me while I continue to work. You're far too kind with the bio. It's not so much about who I am, it's what I do and why I do it.
Yes, sir. And so with that being said, is there anything in particular you'd like to say to our audience before we get into the show?
Well, just buckle up, get a notepad. You can hear some interesting things. It's not always about your story and where you started, it's how you finish. And I'm a testament of that. And that's the thing that I really want. If you grasp onto anything, any young person out there, if you got a young person who's struggling and you want them to hear from someone who had overcome obstacles, please have them have a seat, because it's something that I've done and really help to enlighten them on how they can do it also.
Right. Well, we're going to start first with a segment that I call Your Life Story and Personal Journey. I like to have the audience get the opportunity to learn who you were before you got to be this outstanding individual that you are today. So, can you tell us, who was Lorenzo Hopkins before the titles, the medals, and the leadership roles?
Ironically, in elementary school, I was one of those kids during that time in the 70s that was labeled as a slow learner, held back on an early grade. Struggled, but I don't believe this is before the time when they really knew what ADHD was, before they knew what just any of the things that happened in from bad neighbors like trauma is. They didn't understand that, so they thought it was slow learner. But what actually impacted what was going on was, I was bored. I was bored in the classroom. My mother was a hardworking woman. I've seen her work 2 jobs for as long as I can remember. And father was around, certainly was, Lord rest his soul. But my father was a Rolling Stone.
Okay.
So where he laid his hat was his home. You know the song. So I was forced to. My mother we didn't have a lot of money, so went to school. Didn't know you were poor because everybody around you didn't have anything, didn't have much. You know, so again, we grew up in a neighborhood where during that time I was born in the 70s. In the 80s, when the crack epidemic hit, it hit our community hard. Everyone was trying to hustle and sell drugs. My mother's home was shot up one time. My 2 brothers, my older brother, Lord rest his soul, and my younger brother and my father did time in the penitentiary. I was able to navigate that world without doing that time in the penitentiary, not because I was better than them, but because some of the things we're going to talk about this evening was I ended up didn't have money to go to college. Let me say that. So I went to my mother and said, I'm not going to college. She says, son, if you're not going to college, you're going to get a job. You have to help pay some bills around here. You can't just be here. So anyone know anything about Delaware? They have poultry factories, chicken plants, as they call
it. Yes.
So I took myself to a poultry factory, and this is a funny story now. And I went there the first night with a pair of penny loafers on. Men had penny loafers back in that little dress shoe with a little penny in it. Some shorts on, and they put me in a place called the Boning, which was the coldest place in the plant. So I had to go call someone to bring me some clothes in. That didn't last too long. The first night I left a half a day nauseated. If you've ever been in a poultry plant, you have chickens that with no feathers on them coming out of things, dripping stuff, and I couldn't stand the smell. Went home a half a day, slept all day. I worked at night. Went back the next day, left a half a day and quit. Went knocked on my mother's door, said, Mom, I can't do this. She said, you had to do something. I said, well, I'm going to the military. That's what led me into the military.
So were there any other earlier experiences that shaped your understanding of discipline and responsibility?
Yeah, my mother. What she said was the rule. And we talk about leadership, and that's why I'm glad I-480 in Leadership wrote a book about it, because our community is missing that. My mother was the law at that time. If she says when you get home from school, you change your school clothes, no one in the house, that's what she meant. So that structure and discipline, even though it wasn't perfect, again, we shaped and we did what we could do sneakily. And my brothers ended up taking another path. They're back. Well, one of them deceased. My older brother just passed away this in last May. And my younger brother, both of them been out of prison for years. They got their stuff together. But that discipline my mother instilled in me, and also I didn't want to hurt her feelings, right? I didn't want to get to the point where I disappointed her because she had already had 2 kids in the system. I didn't want to be the third.
Lorenzo, as you started out with your story, I think there's like an enormous amount of us that come from that same era, that same time, and those same circumstances. But it's all about the path that a lot of us choose. And when you say you didn't want to disappoint your mother, can you tell us what was it about what your mother said, as well as the environment, that kept you on the straight and narrow?
I just saw how hard she was working to try to make ends meet, right? I'm talking about working a job during the day, going to work a job on weekends at a nursing home as a CNA, and that work isn't easy. Working for the state of Delaware at a place for the mentally ill. So she spent her days and nights trying to provide for 3 boys that I don't think at that age we understood the gravity of what she was doing. But just to keep the lights on was a chore for her, just to make sure we ate every day. I don't recall ever missing a meal. It wasn't what we wanted. Now, don't get me wrong. Now, whatever she cooked, we had to eat, whether it be liver, some beans, or whatever. But when I said I didn't want to disappoint her, I saw how hard she was working. And I didn't want to give her something else to have to worry about outside of what my two brothers and my father had gotten into, and trying to pay the bills and the strain and stress of that. I think I would rather not. I decided in my head I can't add to that burden, if it makes sense.
Yeah. So growing up during the crack epidemic, what did you witness that shaped your mission?
Aunts and my uncles and some of my uncles and aunts got hooked to drugs. Devastated. Like I said, when my brothers got into the game, I knew all the players just like they did. I could have gotten some of the same wholesale drugs, but again, I kept thinking about how it would disappoint my mother that I didn't want to, because I could have taken that route. But then when I saw sons selling drugs to their mothers,
No.
the mother's on drugs, but the son is selling drugs to someone else, to me, that would have made me quit. My mother's house gets shot up because one of my brothers had a beef. Younger brother had a beef with someone. They came through. We were in there and shot several bullet holes through the home. My younger brother, I went away to the military, came home. They were in a street fight or brawl, and he got hit in the back of the head with a jackhammer or crowbar. Was in a coma for a while. My first response was, I'm going to get some get back. And my mother pulled me aside and said, how would that help? How would that get you to where you want to be? Because again, being street, you want to go and get back. But the discipline and stuff that my mother just pulled me aside and said, see, I know what you're thinking. Don't think about it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
So what was the moment you realized leadership would become your life's work?
I often look back and find what was missing in my upbringing. And I know my mother was there for leadership. And often if you know about Dr. King, he died before I was born. But back when I was coming up, you had people like the Reverend Jesse Jackson and others in our community that leadership role. And every time I talk to someone and say, well, what's missing is we don't have leadership in our community. Then I start thinking about what changed my life. And it was that inner mastery. I had to learn who I was, because the media had a picture of us at that time was indicating that we were either drug dealers. The likelihood of me coming from a household I came from, it was a high likelihood that I would end up in penitentiary or dead by the age of 25. Right? So when I start thinking about what was it that I could help other people with, often we treat the symptoms. We treat the symptoms.
Right.
Those symptoms are addiction. Those symptoms are drug dealing. But what we have to treat is the underlying root. People join gangs and get involved in the game for a reason. And that reason is often what? A sense of belonging.
Yes.
So when I start talking about leadership was, okay, I didn't think about in corporate America or in the military. I thought about how you guide those within our community first. And what was missing in most of our epicenters of our Black communities at the time was strong leadership. People were typically following the dope man with the best car, the dope man with the best materials, and you could pass out money. And that led them somewhere wrong. So I said, how do we counterbalance that message? And that's when I start really taking a serious role in leadership about how do we lead people, trying to go to the Boys and Girls Club and speak to young people, getting my first jobs, working in group homes with young people. And then the military piece of it is what really put me over the edge, pushed me further.
Wow. Who were the key figures who believed in you early on?
My mother was a big key figure that believed in me early on. I had one teacher, this story I often tell, is I struggled in math. That's why I'm a criminal justice major and a master's and all that stuff. I'm not, if I was a mathematician, I'd be an engineer or something. I always joke with people about that. So I struggled with math, and in 10th grade, I had a teacher, a white female named Miss Hopkins. And I said, I can't do math. I'm not going to college. I'm not college material. And she said, whoa. And she pulled me aside and said, you can't do math because you keep telling yourself you can't do math. If you want to go to college, you have to change the way you think. And this lady tutored me and pushed me. And the next thing you know, I ended up passing algebra, I was 1, 2, then calculus, and then graduating from high school with really decent math grades. This lady I credit to changing my mindset.
So, what personal challenges did you overcome and strengthen your resilience? Well, that strengthened your resilience.
One was the label that was put on me at an early age. I had to convince myself that I wasn't what people say I was, right? So I could have said, when they say you're a slow learner, I could have gave into that and stopped trying and stopped doing things, but I didn't. I said, let me keep pushing and seek extra help. My mother couldn't help with homework because she was working several jobs. Not her fault. A lot of homes are like that. Another challenge I had was no matter when I started doing well or not, I had no money for college. So what was my out? It wasn't a poultry plant. It wasn't a chicken factory because I tried that for 2 half a days. So my way out was what motivated me. Really, the challenge was, how do I maximize my resources to get what I want and where I want to be? Right. So when I started looking at what avenues I could have gave up and say I'm just going hustle. But then I start looking, okay, one way out is the military. What if I go to the military and get money for college? I had zero money for college, and here I am holding 3 degrees or more, including a master's degree.
Well, that's a tribute to your resilience. But when you think about it, and you had all of those trials and tribulations, when you think about younger Lorenzo Hopkins, what would you tell him now for what you know today?
Don't give up is one. Brighter days are coming. 2, just because you don't see your way doesn't mean there's no way. You have to master that thing with even a younger Lorenzo. Block out the noise, because the world's going to label you in a box with everybody else. In order to break out of that box, you have to believe, 1, that you belong, and 2, that you have to set goals.
Wow. So, in learning to set goals, I mean, when did you start to doing that part of your growth and your the process of evolving?
I started doing that, and I would say in 10th grade of high school, because I was like an average student in middle school, how played sports, and I really don't see a future from where I'm from. And in 10th grade, after seeing Miss Hopkins, she helped me overcome my phobia of math. And then I start saying, okay, I can parlay this thing into something and get out of here, right? When I say get out of here, I love the people in my community. They were family, but I just knew there was something inside of me that I needed to do differently for me. So when I started thinking about what's out there at 10th grade, I started setting goals. Okay, I'm going to graduate on time. And then at first I said, I don't have any money. So I defeated myself, saying, well, I'm just going to get a job. If my mother had not sat me down and sent me to that poultry plant, I don't know where I would be. She opened my eyes, because she said, I did that because I wanted you to know that's not what you want to do with the rest of your life. And my mother, prior to going to the state, had worked in a poultry factory.
Wow.
So then what I did was I started setting those goals. And after the poultry factory, I saw the military. I'm going to go to the military. I'm going to spend 4 years. I'm going to get my VA benefits. I'm going to go to college. 20 plus years later, I stayed in the military and made a career of it, and get a pension from them. That's because the military opened my eyes that the world was bigger than my neighborhood. It allowed me to see places that otherwise I wouldn't have had seen otherwise. And I started looking around and going, wow, this is a big world out here. And it's not as hopeless as I thought it was from where I came from.
So, how did your upbringing influence your commitment to service?
The violence part is because I had an aunt of mine, my dad's sister was murdered in a domestic violence incident. Then I saw, as a young boy, my grandmother, a guy who lived next door to my grandmother, his girlfriend had shot him, and he ran to my grandmother's, shot him in the neck, and died on her kitchen floor. I saw that as a young boy. And then my younger brother getting hit in the head, my older brother being shot in the arm. there's a litany of things that I said we have to do some things differently. And I really started out wanting to be a Delaware State trooper because I wanted to show the world that all police officers aren't bad. And then as I went through the process, I make it all the way through. And during my background, the trooper comes in, he slams these 3 piles of paper on the table and said, explain this. I'm like, what is it? That's your dad's record and your 2 brothers' records. I said, sir, I don't think I have to explain that. I said, if you find something with Lorenzo Hopkins' name, I'll explain that. But I can't explain anything that someone else did. Short of the story is I got turned down by the Delaware State Police several times. I could have been beat up by that, but I didn't. I ended up going to work for another state agency in law enforcement and then end up joining the federal government, where it was one of the best things that ever happened to my career.
So, throughout all of that, tell us, what does purpose mean to you today?
Purpose to me today means legacy. I'm at the point I call it the legacy phase of my life. And to have lived and not contributed anything to me is to die in vain. How did I make this world a better place? How did I change lives? Because what's going to live long after I'm gone is the impact I had on someone's life and change someone's life. I want someone to come to my son or to my wife of 30 some years and go, because of your husband, I changed my life. Because of your father, I changed my life. So purpose to me at this point has shifted from providing for my family to legacy building, trying to leave this world a better place than I found it through violence, through leadership intervention and coaching and strategies and all those things.
So what is one lesson from your childhood that still guides you today?
Not falling prey to the labels and stereotypes that are assigned. Because if you remember, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was very few people of color on TV. The ones you saw were either in handcuffs through a drug raid, especially during the crack epidemic. So you will have a little kid thinking, right, that, wow, is that all I'm good for? So what drives me today is, instead of trying to, at one time I did things, tried to prove people wrong. What I taught myself as an adult was, it's not about them. It's about me. Why do I want to do it? And I don't need people to motivate me or drive me. I don't need to prove naysayers wrong.
Right. But when you come from a lot of our communities, that's one of those things that if you don't have an ego, you get one real quick.
Right.
And so you got to do what you got to do. But what I think is so important and so powerful is the fact that you were able to sustain an enormous amount of trouble as a young boy, as a young teen, and you were still able to have that resilience to not only change your environment, but to become that leader itself that sets the example for the community. So when you do that, and like let's say you're back home now. I don't know if you're still in Delaware or not, but if you are,
yes,
and you're back home and you're around in the community now, how has things changed, or how have you changed the community?
I'm often consulted about how do I make it out. Now I go to myself and a partner of mine. We do a lot of community events. A few summers ago, we went down to Sussex County. They have like 13 or 14 unsolved murders in a small town, a small county. And we did a Stop the Violence initiative at one of the only, Richard Allen School was one of the Black premier color schools back in the day in Delaware. We set it apart. We had law enforcement there. We had the families of victims there. And we did a whole day around violence intervention and prevention. Some families told their stories about how the death of the loved one impacted them. So I'm continually pouring back into communities and speaking. So I'm impacting it because really I'm on the verge of starting. And retirement simply didn't put me to rest. What it did was it re-energized me. Now I can give back because I want to, right? I have the time to do leadership academy for youth in our community. I have the time to go to churches and teach them how they can better impact communities without just giving out dollars and cents. I have the time to sit and talk. I think we're often, and people are going to take this wrong when I say this, in our community, we often are over-mentored and under-advised.
So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, sir. So everybody said that this person needs a mentor. Most time mentors are just cheerleaders. Whatever you do, hey, rah, Charles, good job, great job, bring this home, do that. Advisors, think about an advisor, a financial advisor, a medical advisor. They're not just cheering you. What they're doing, they're giving you some valuable information and giving you a roadmap of how to succeed. Another thing I have going on is I'm a licensed in life insurance sales and financial planning stuff, right?
Okay.
One of the biggest disconnects in our community is what? Financial literacy.
Life insurance.
Life insurance and financial literacy, right? So I go now and I go around and actually do workshops on that stuff, because how many times have you seen someone pass away, someone's a breadwinner, and it devastates the whole family?
Yes, sir.
Could you imagine, Charles? I don't know what your background, but could you imagine if someone left Charles King 2 or 3 houses and property, how far you'll be in life now ahead?
Yes, exactly. Because I mean, again, seriously, I mean, the relevance of what you're talking about, I can definitely understand that, because in doing business, this is after I got out the military.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, it's hard for us to get them funds.
Yes. Yes. So you understand what I'm saying when I say every generation, the reason the wealth gap continues to widen for us is because we all start from ground zero every generation. Yep. Because either people don't see the value in Big Mama's house and they sell it, or don't pay the taxes on it and it get taken away, right? But think about it, if we had a generation where we left some property or we left some resources that generation had to start over, how far we can advance as a community. All of us, every one of us had to start over, find our new house, learn about financial literacy. School doesn't teach it.
Yep.
So we have to start from ground zero. And if we didn't have to start over so much, we could make some traction.
Yeah. So how did your environment shape your understanding of violence and prevention?
What I noticed was the only time that people wanted to help when after a tragic incident, the police showed up, they cleaned up the carnage, got the bad person, but they left a void of trauma and traumatic experiences in the children in the community which it happened.
Yep.
So what I decided to do was, how can I do 2 things? How can I educate people on the impact of community violence, how it started and how that cycle continues, and how do we deal and help people pick up the pieces after traumatic experiences? So what I started doing was, okay, once I started going to school and learning, and see, because people often, we look for help oftentimes outside of our community, but we are the stewards of our community. We are the people within our community or have the expertise in what's going on in our communities. And what we do know, that cycle of violence, if you hit my cousin, somebody in my family gonna hit your people, and it continues that cycle of violence. So what I started was doing to educating people on, especially if something happened in the community, I made it my business to reach out to the family member and say, hey, this is what to expect. You might want to get this person some help, because retaliation is real and it's going to happen soon.
Right. Let's transition over to your work in entrepreneurship and Northstar Coaching LLC. Tell us, what inspired you to create Northstar Coaching LLC?
Let's start with the name, Northstar. Okay. Northstar. I was deliberate and intentional about that name, simply because what the North Star represents. You remember Harriet Tubman followed the North Star to take people who were in bondage to freedom.
Yes.
Every time a ship is out on the ocean, if you're a Navy person, you'll appreciate this. If it's dark and pitch black, people follow the North Star. So North Star to me means direction. It guides. It guides. It doesn't shrink. It is not jealous. It stays put to guide people to a safe harbor, a safe point. North Star for me, my company, is just that, right? To pull the best out of people, something that's already in you. My goal is to try to pull the best out of them. If it be an organization, if it be a young person trying to go to college, if it be someone just coming home from the penitentiary and they're trying to change their life. Those are the things that I do through North Star. I love to get into schools and work with young people, because what we do know is that young people are, before their frontal lobe get developed, if they see a lot of, for example, let me give you an example real quick. Could you imagine at 4 years old seeing your father beat your mother?
No.
By the time you start elementary school, you got to go out those doors, and you see your first serious assault.
Oh, wow.
Could you imagine by the age of 7, before 10, you see your first dead body?
Oh, my God.
Then at 13, you start carrying a gun. Why? Because your social reality says what? It's a dangerous world out there, inside the house and outside the house. So what I try to get people to understand is, you have kids going into these schools with trauma that's already from the house to the community, and then you tell them in school, sit down and be quiet and learn. Could you imagine how cruel that is if you're a young child who's experienced that trauma, don't know where your next meal gonna come from, seeing all this violence, and now I'm supposed at a young age be compartmentalized and say, I need to learn with all this other stuff going on in my head. Now in my class, I'm sitting there, right? Think about it. You're sitting there going, am I gonna see my dad beat my mother tonight? Am I going to make it home through the gang members or whatever the case may be? So we have to understand that. And the one thing we've done consistently in this country, we've educated kids the same way we have since the last 50 or 60 years. And they don't take into consideration the environment that our kids come from. I'm not making excuses for it, but it's hard to sit there and concentrate if, in fact, and I call that cultural competence. If a lot of people don't understand it, they think Johnny is acting up or showing off in class, but Johnny's really traumatized.
Well, I agree with you on those 2 points, but so, and just kind of like how I would put that, and you could help me out with this, is that, yeah, you're right, it's not making an excuse, but the reality is the reality.
Yes.
And so I think when kids go to school and they facing all of this trauma day in and day out, I mean, this is where the disconnect comes in. And so I think what happens in the shortfall in the education system in a lot of these schools is that the teachers aren't actually trying to connect to that child. What they're doing is they're constantly saying, you need to be here. You just got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is what you're supposed to do regardless of the case.
Right.
They're not understanding the circumstances of that child. Because when that child is in that kind of environment and in that culture, that one is all he or she is going to know. 2, the thing that's going to really make it worse is that the teacher is going to do something that's going to hit a trigger. And when they hit that trigger,
yeah,
they're going to get the bad result. So then all of a sudden the kid is considered to be disruptive, but nobody's actually trying to find out what is he or she going through.
See, and that's the prevention side of when you talk prevention intervention, that's the prevention side. The prevention side is trying to keep young people from entering the system. The intervention side for my business is trying to keep people already engaged in the system. How do we destabilize that violence triggers and patterns so it won't continue to rear its ugly head? The prevention side for me is clearly for younger people before they get involved in a system that is so hard to get out of. And again, the intervention side is for those individuals or teens or young people who are already in truancy court, who's already in a detention center, who's already been to adults who already been to prison. That's the intervention part for me. So I separated them to those intentionally into those two categories.
Wow. So does your program also consist of restorative justice?
Yes, it does.
Ooh. So tell us about that, and what has been your success rate?
Well, what happens is, I'm gonna get what myself and some other friends got invited to our old high school, because I won't name the high school. I won't do that. The high school ended up, but those who listen and know me, they know what's going to. They ended up having some issues with, they didn't hire a lot of minority teachers. We saw the disparity in discipline when it came to people of color and kids of color and all those things. So we got together with a group of people from the school. The school did have courage enough to bring some of us expert people in, and we sat down with the group and start working through how to hire more teachers. How do we streamline the discipline process so kids get a chance? I remember mentoring a kid at a school, and he was a star athlete, and he was being late. He was coming late to school, and the dean of discipline said, "Well, if he late one more time, we're gonna suspend him." And I said, "Well, what is that gonna do?"
Mm-hmm.
He's showing up. So how do we let's talk to him and find out how we can navigate him and make sure he's on time, because we shouldn't be going straight to suspension or because a lot of kids, if you suspend them, what's going to happen? They get farther and farther from the work. They become angry. They're going to get disgruntled, right? So what we did, we were able to talk. He was catching a friend to school, and the friend always was late. So when I talked to him, I said, "Look, man," and I had to go to the point where I went to school with the kid's father. So I called his father and said, "Look, man, they're talking about kicking him out, suspending him out of school for being late." He's well, he's waiting for us. I said, "No, but if his friend is always late, you might want to see that he gets on the bus or someone drops him off." But just think, if I had not been there, what would have happened? He would have been suspended.
Well, he'd have been suspended and probably been in the system.
Yes.
So, can you tell us, what is the core mission behind your coaching and consulting work?
My core mission really is to help businesses and communities, right, live out, become their best selves through coaching, mentoring, and teaching leadership programs. Simply because there's a void in our community. Especially, think about it. Think about the number of fatherless households that we have, and we'll throw mentors at them. We'll do this and that. But is there really that advisement piece to go, what is your next step? What is your next goal? What are you doing next? That I just texted my nephew, my great nephew, graduated from the Marine Corps. He got married this weekend, went back and was having some separation anxiety, so to speak. So he and I debriefed him on the phone at the airport, headed back, because I know that young kids who really are hungry for that leadership, that fatherly leadership, need someone not to just mentor and cheer them on, but give them the real, that what do you have to come back? What are you going to come back here for? What is back here for you? Is there a reason that you decided to leave? And oftentimes we don't want to tell our children or our people in our community the truth, because the system, we feel that the world is already bearing down on them. But I think it's incumbent upon us to tell those truths. And I think I built enough credibility through my life story to be able to go in and speak to parents and speak to young people and let them know what the devastating cost of some of their decisions could be.
Wow. So just when you just think about that, as you were talking about your nephew, and with the separation anxiety, tell us about some of the conversations you've had to have with some of those kids in the school, and how did that turn out? Did you turn out to be more of a mentor for them, something that they really needed?
Yes, because what I did was not simply a mentor. I'm going to give you another example. So one of the kids I was mentoring, because I was working in DC, driving back to Delaware, going near my old high school, an hour away from my house, to mentor several kids. So the kid came down irate one day. He was like mad. He said, "Look, his teacher just disrespected me, and I asked her something, and she let the other kid, the white kid, do it. She didn't let me do it. So what I did was I helped him process. He said, I should have slapped her. I said, and that would gotten you where. So we talked through, and I talked him through how to navigate even when he was upset. So what ended up happening, he went and pulled the teacher aside, talked to her, told her how he felt, and it was constructive versus destructive, because he was on the point where he felt disrespected in front of his peers, and he wanted to snap, so to speak. So me merely being around and being able to help him navigate that. I hate to see what would happen if we weren't there. I wish more people would go into the schools and volunteer, to be honest with you, because our kids don't know how to process some of this stuff, especially when they come from a street. That reaction, them responding, is they react instead of responding. You know, when you take medication, if you respond, you're getting positive, but when you react, it never ends well. You have a bad reaction to medicine. We need to make sure our kids understand that part of it. Because those social skills, for example, I couldn't call my mom, bro. I wish I would have.
I'll tell you this, you know, the time I was in school, look, I'll tell you like this. My mom never got a call for me, but she did with my brother and sister.
Mine too, yep.
They knew better after a while.
Yeah. Because calling your mom, and that's a small, I know it seems small, you guys, but people often laugh and call it cute when kids do stuff like smart mouth, using profanity. An undisciplined child turns out to be an undisciplined adult. Yep. Undisciplined adults end up in a penitentiary where someone's going to tell them what to do anyway, 24 hours a day, 7 days, what to eat, how to sleep, where to talk, and all those kinds of things. Right. It doesn't end well for them.
And see, that's where they definitely need to get themselves the opportunity of having somebody to show them what structure is. A lot of kids are missing structure as well, and see if they don't have somebody telling them when they're wrong, things what to do and not to do, and why that situation is, then they just run wild. And you know, I can't say that, you know, for the time that, I'm not sure how old you are, but I know that
I'm closer to 60 than 50.
Okay, well, see, so, you know, well, I'm 59, and I'll tell you, that part about having the issues in school, no, sir. That's a no-go. That's a no-go. So you know what's right and what's wrong. So you don't go to school and show out, because, you know, from the old school discipline, you know, I know my grandmother
yes
used to go to the school, and since you want to show out there, she gonna show you why you showing out, why not to do it in front of everybody.
Yes. Yes. Also, as it relates to, and the reason I wrote my book that came out February 10th, I wish I had my camera on. The guys, please understand, I'm not being disrespectful. I got a nice sports coat on. It's just some reason it was working when I first logged on, and now for some reason it's not working. So again, I'm not being aloof. I don't want you to believe that. The reason I wrote my book, I took my experience from the military, my leadership experience from the community and everything, and compiled it into a book called From Ordinary to Extraordinary: 4 Pillars of Culture Changing Leadership, How Leaders Transform Culture, Ignite Purpose, and Inspire Lasting Change. And these 4 principles really go to the heart of how I was able to navigate and change my life, right? It talked about, start with a clear vision. Remember, I told you about goal setting, Mr. King. That's one thing I talked about. Being the example, right? Showing up as your authentic self. Empowering people and yourself, not controlling them. And then creating systems to reinforce what you want to happen.
Wow. So those are some really key principles there. So with those principles, can you tell us why do you break down those principles, and what's the importance of those?
Clear vision is important, because if you don't know where you're going, the world is going to lead you anywhere. People in the world are going to lead you anywhere. if it makes sense. If you don't have where you're gonna, the media or TV is gonna tell you how you're supposed to act. People are gonna set limitations on you that, oh, you can't resist because you don't have this degree, because you don't live in this zip code. So the clear vision part, it sets the direction. It sets direction about where do you want that North Star. Let me say that North Star tells you what direction you want to go in. Because you can't just say, I'm going to navigate this world without direction, because guess what happens? As life happens and the winds of life starts to blow, it's going to take you off course everywhere that you don't want to go. So that's why that clear vision and clear purpose is important, that one. Showing up, you are a standard. That means no matter what's going on around you, you have to be able to show up as your authentic self, meaning that no matter what excuse you can use, you can go, well, the man don't care about me, so I'm gonna act a fool, I'm gonna do this. That's self-discipline and showing up, that setting the standard. Chapter 5 talks about inner mastery. And chapter 5 is a chapter on inner mastery, and it talks about knowing what your triggers are, identifying who you are, what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy. And that inner mastery piece is really key, because again, if you don't master who you are, people are going to tell you who you are.
So can you go ahead? I'm sorry.
And to empower yourself and others, if you allow, or if you start to believe in your mind or heart that someone else can stop you from succeeding, you will never succeed, because you have given power. That's why I say empower people, don't control them. The same thing with yourself. Don't be controlled by outside resources or people. Because if you don't empower yourself and you go say, well, I can't do nothing because of the man. Every time you fail, it's because of the man. Are there things happen that we can't control that are biased and are racist? Yeah, it is. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. But we're proof, you, myself, and others, that we can make it in spite of that, correct?
Yes, you can. But see, that's where you have to have that discipline and that structure and learn that when it's time to make that move and it's something that you want to do, that's how you have to keep that focus and that vision in line.
Yes.
A lot of us, now I will tell you this, and this is just being honest. There are some people that I grew up that we started on the same path. On the same path. I don't know what happened. It seemed like we got halfway down the road. It seemed like people fell off. I don't know where they went.
Everybody that came with you can't go with you. Correct?
Right. That's true too.
Simply because I found myself earlier in my career, Charles, trying to pull people places they weren't ready to go.
Right.
I was doing more dragging and pulling than leading breadcrumbs and helping people navigate and get to the next level, which was a detriment to me, because as long as I was dragging people and trying to pull them, I wasn't focusing on getting to where I needed to be.
Right.
So what I started doing was, I will never, ever again try to pull people where they're not equipped or ready to go. What's the saying? Trees don't even hang out with grass, even though they started in the same place. It's okay to outgrow people sometime. And when you're pulling, even airplanes have weight standards and they take off against the wind. But if they're too heavy, guess what happens? Their altitude is stymied.
Yep.
Think of my Air Force side. You get what I'm saying? So we have to get to the point where we don't have to sacrifice ourselves to try to save others, especially if those people want to come along. I'll take anybody with me who want to come, but I won't drag anybody anymore.
I know that's right. I'm serious, dead serious. That right there, is sad to say, as optimistic as I am.
Me too.
That is the one thing that I promise you, that is such a burden that it feels like you don't carry the whole world, and you can't carry the whole world.
Yes, but you didn't stop me from trying. But what I found was I was taking my eyes off the vision and my goal, and I couldn't be my best self, because it's not about me per se. I always pray for God to bless me to be a blessing to others. Am I cutting myself short when I'm so focused on trying to save someone who's hell-bent on drowning?
Wow. Now that was a visual. How do you define leadership transformation?
Whoa, okay. See, the mistake about leadership transformation that people make is they believe, or leaders often believe, that I could promote a good performer and they become a great leader. That never happens. The two are they're different. So transformation to me is not so much of being the greatest agency in the world, but if you take mediocre people and they give you all they got versus cutting corners and being short, to me, that's transforming, right? It all starts with how you show up as a leader. People say, oh, well, showing up. Yeah, showing up is part of the thing, but how you show up is extremely important, right? And what you do when you show up is the other. Some people come to work, collect the check. Oh, I'm a great leader. Who told you that? I've never called myself a great leader. You know who did? The people who I led and who now are running agencies, who are now supervisors and leaders in their own right. I don't have time to toot my own horn, but I know after 3+ decades of leading people in the Middle East during a wartime and to working in some of the most violent cities in this nation, that people don't simply follow you because your title. They follow you based on relationships. They know that you care for them and they're willing to lay their life down for you because you do care. Military is attention about that part, but civilian world, sometimes it takes a while to catch up with, that they think that if they do a lot of stuff and just put stuff into place, like strategy builds culture. No. Strategy and culture are different. Culture is that thing that makes sure how successful strategy tells you how successful strategy will be.
So, what makes Northstar coaching different from traditional leadership programs?
I am a person who isn't talking theory. I lived it. I've led people in the Middle East during wartime. I led officers in some of the DC and Wilmington, Delaware, some of those violent cities. So I'm not talking about practical theory. I'm talking about lived experiences. Some people are theoretical. They can tell you what the book says. I'm going to tell you these 4 principles are tried and true because I lived them myself. I walked them myself, and it sustained me over 30 years in leadership capacity, transitioning the military and civilian world.
So, what challenges do leaders face today that didn't exist 20 years ago?
Whoa. Technology. We have a aging workforce that are starting to leave the work world. And it's not often voluntarily. It's because we have to think of smarter ways to do it. And some leaders are stuck in the way that we used to do it. Another challenge is we have this younger generation. I'm not saying they're bad, because they're not. It's just different. These new generations. Back in the day, we got a good job. We kept a good job. We committed to the job. These young people, if they don't feel value in a short amount of time, they're leaving. And you're losing expertise, right? You're going to lose. As we go out the door, the older people, I retired last year completely from working for anybody else, continue to work for myself. Could you imagine when people like you and I leave the workforce and the younger generation? Because remember when the baby boomers start to leave, all the baby boomers start to leave? You see that void that was left? Now imagine what's going to be left now. And then you had all the layoffs on the federal level. So succession planning is a lost art. So a lot of agencies don't do succession planning. They think they can plug and play. Like I get somebody, Hopkins leave, I'm gonna get somebody put in his position. That doesn't always work out.
Well, this is unfortunate, but it's true that what you just described is what they're actually changing and making the labor force to be.
Yep.
Now, just to be honest with you, because I see that as being short-sighted. And again, you can help me out with this.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as being short-sighted because, I think in taking the approach away of having, the central personnel, the essential personnel, having people there that's doing the work that we're used to seeing them do was productive. They're doing this because they're trying to get more with less, which means that if you're trying to get more for less and you got one person doing 10 jobs, that's not productive at all.
It's not. And you know what it does? It burns out those good people.
Yes, it does.
And guess who stays when good people leave? The bad ones. The bad ones.
well, so you almost made me say something.
The bad ones. The bad ones. How many times have you seen it though, right? They work that good person to death and they're like, you know what? Because the way you do, and what I've figured in my life, what you do, if you work hard and well, you reward it with more work.
Yeah, and I just I'm trying to maneuver and mastermind that old plan back into play, because I think having people be productive and doing those really good things, will be more than something that's cost effective, but it'll be what people are used to seeing and what people really want. You see, we're being convinced in so many different ways of how they're using these Jedi mind tricks to make people think that no, you don't need this, you don't need this, you don't need this. And it's just like what we're hearing today when we hear folks saying, we're I'm the greatest person in the world, or we're doing the best of all of this, and this is what you need, and we're just going to get this for you. And it's like when you sit there, if you critically think that what you just heard, you're like, that's a lie.
Yep. But how many critical things do we have? I have this saying that shallow thinkers drown in intellectual waters. Shallow thinkers drown in intellectual waters because they see the surface and not what's going on in the undercurrent. And what you're saying, though, that's what separates the bad agencies from the good agencies and organizations. What you just talked about, right? That relationship building, that I'm going to ensure that I'm not overburdening my people who do good work. I'm going to make sure we spread this thing around. If people aren't up to snuff, I can train you to do certain things, but I can't teach you how to treat people. If you don't know how to treat people, you're going to make this agency suffer greatly. Unfortunately, throughout my career, I had to demote and get rid of people because they knew the technical part of the job, but they didn't understand how to treat people. And if you can't treat people right, people aren't going to work for you. They're not going to want to stay. And what that does is it burns out those true people who want to stay, but it also has those people who are bad employees. If you don't deal with them, it's going to sour the whole bunch because people think they can get away with a lot of other stuff.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Also, one more thing. I've never met a bad leader who told me they're a bad leader. They think they're the greatest ever. Have you ever met one? Think about all the bosses you had or supervisors, the bad ones. Have they ever thought they were bad? They thought they were the greatest thing since leaders were made.
Bread.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to change cultures, because leaders drive culture. They demonstrate it, they model it, and don't tell me, why you want to blame the leaders? Because leaders determine who's hired, who's promoted, who's fired, who's disciplined. If you sit around and promote someone who don't know how to treat people at the bottom level, do you think making them a supervisor is going to make them better or worse?
Oh, that's going to make them even worse.
Because that power drunk, guess what that does? It kills a whole division or team because they don't know how to treat people. But two, you're telling the bad performers to get promoted, that behavior is acceptable.
Oh, that right there, that sounds very scary. But that's also.
But it happens, right? True. You know it. It happens, right? You promote someone. If I go to an agency, the first thing I ask them, organization, I ask them, what does your last 5 promotions tell your organization about what you value? And I have them sit down and write down the 5 last people they promoted and their attributes. And what they start doing is, ooh, that person right there, we know they didn't know how to talk to people, but we still promote them anyway, thinking. So the message you're sending is that behavior is acceptable.
Yep.
One organization promoted someone who didn't want to come to work, didn't answer the phone. Now you put them at one of the highest levels. What is that telling your staff? That behavior is acceptable.
It's acceptable, very much so. How do you help organizations build safer, healthier cultures?
Well, safer, I get that from my military experience and my federal law enforcement experience, because the high level of trauma within the workplace, and you often hear about workplace people snapping in the workplace. I do that through relationship building, right? Because people, I'm not talking about domestic violence, outside of domestic violence, people don't hurt people they love, right? If they care about you, they'll give their life for you. But when you treat people badly and you don't teach people that you have value, and you also got to be careful how you fire people.
Yes.
How you free?
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Let me rephrase that. How you free people up for other opportunities.
Yep.
How you free people for other opportunities. Because if you treat people extremely badly, you got to remember, in my business and law enforcement, you got to see people on the street again.
Yep.
And there wasn't one street in DC that I couldn't walk down, catching a bus or anything, that even though I had arrested people before, that no one ever tried to fight me, shoot me, or anything. You know why? Because I never stripped a man or a woman from their dignity.
Oh.
It's always Mr. and Mrs.
Yep.
I'm explaining to you why I'm doing this. You know that I'm only doing it because I had to, because your actions. I've never had someone trying to jump me, disrespect me. And I go, my wife can tell you, we go everywhere. I'm walking around, I see people come up like, hey, Hopkins, what's up, Chief? And we just have a conversation. I've fired people before and they thank me because I freed them up for other opportunities.
Wow. So let's transition over to your work as a retired federal law enforcement leader.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, first of all, what led you into federal law enforcement?
Well, like I said earlier, my goal was to be a state police officer. I got turned down several times, not any doing it on my own. I decided not to take that personally, and went into another avenue. And then I ended up applying for a job on the federal level, getting it, and I sent it through the ranks to chief of the high risk containment strategies division, where I was tasked with trying to stop, prevent and intervene in violence throughout some of the most, in Washington D.C. and some of the most dangerous wards. I also led some award initiatives with our agency and some of the alphabet agencies. When you hear me say alphabet agencies, DC has more law enforcement than anywhere in the country per capita. You got the FBI, the DEA, the CIA, the U.S. Marshals. So I call them alphabet. There's so many of them. So I led my agency's part of a warning initiative. I remember walking in a room and being one of the few men of color in that room. And people used to say during the height of the George Floyd thing, I can't believe you work in law enforcement. And my retort has always been, if I didn't work in law enforcement, could you imagine what would be said and done in those rooms without my voice in it?
Okay.
You can change and protest all you want from the outside, but change often has to be worked at mutual weight. You have to do it from the inside. Internal change, because people are going to listen more when you're in a position of power on the inside, and you're telling people, not on my watch. You won't do this on my watch. We can't do this. We can't do that.
What was the most challenging aspect of leading high-risk containment strategies?
Officer safety, and every time a young person, I remember working a case before. It's the vicarious trauma that you didn't see it, but when you hear about it, you read about it, you're dealing with people who did it. That a young lady was going to get ice cream in one of the projects in DC, and it was a shootout, and she ended up getting murdered in the crossfire.
What is ice cream?
Ice cream. She was with ice cream truck. The ice cream truck.
She
was out during the summer. A little 11, 10 little girl just getting ice cream. And these knuckleheads came up and start shooting. So I was tasked with seeing who was on supervision under our division, under our how do we track these people down before the retaliation happens, and just reading stories like that over and over again. I used to be in charge of pre-sentence investigations where people write the reports to the judge for sentencing, and I'm sitting there reading and approving this stuff over and over again, and some of the heinous natures of the crime. That to me takes a toll on you if you're not have inner mastery and aren't grounded in some kind of faith or spiritual guidance, because just reading some of the stuff, evil things that men and women do in this world was difficult, right? And I was dealing with the highest of the highest risk. Sex offenders. I remember early in my career, I was transferred from one division. They'll ask the director, "Hey, do you want to go over here?" And I said, "I can't do that." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because I got a young son, and you can't send me in the sex offender unit because I don't know if I can be impartial to people who rape children when I got a little kid." That's part of inner mastery too. So I ended up going to do behavioral health, and the crazy part about it is at the end of my career, I ended up being transferred to the sex offender branch as the chief of that branch. So it went full circle, but you have to know who you are before, and know what your biases are before you take on any role in that inner mastery part.
Tell us about that, your experience in that division at that time.
People do some really sex offender. If you think about sex offenders, I'm talking about everything from pedophilia to we had
Okay.
yes, exactly, pedophilia. We had a man. They thought it. I worked with the local police department, because we thought a guy who was on supervision was raping women in the middle of early mornings when they were going out to go to work. And they got sketches of it. So my team was working with the police department to find out who could this person be. I'm talking about this guy was a serial rapist. So could you imagine being a young lady? Some of our staff caught the train to the city early in the morning. You're trying to work and find this serial rapist that you know is out there, and how devastating or scary that has to be for them. And you put your stuff out there to go, I got to solve this crime, and even though it may put me in harm's way. So those are the things that we deal with the sex offender population. You got people who, I'm talking about everything from molesting children to violent rape to they're on supervision and still going to the schools around the corner, flashing children. The worst thing I've dealt with is someone getting released from the Bureau of Prisons, a sex offender, sexual predator, and not having an address, so they get released to the street. So could you imagine how that went?
That had to be a scary situation.
Yes.
All the way around.
Yes. And then it's hard to find housing. So even if someone wants to be rehabilitated, you can't live within so many miles of a school. You can't live near this park. So we had a lot of people who we were fighting, trying to get homes to try to do some restorative justice stuff with. But the way society works, oftentimes that crime is hard to get people into programming.
Wow. So tell us this, because now I know with your work there with federal law enforcement, this is one of the things I know that had to be very important. How do you design evidence-based violence prevention systems?
I did a great deal of that. First of all, you have to take the tedious time. One, you can't be so ego-driven that it has to be your idea, right? You have to be willing to study what's out there already, and then you have to bring it back and tailor it to fit your population. What always bothered me was this country, we often get people from Canada and other places as the expert. If you know anything about DC, DC is slightly different than most places, right? People say gangs that have different community crews. People in DC they have one jail. They go to jail while they're being held, but if they can do any serious prison time, they go through the federal system anywhere throughout the country.
Wow.
Yes. Which means I visited prisons all over a lot of places in this country. And what we did was we were trying to get to the point where if they had thinking for a change in prison, we try to do an aftercare part of that in the community because they're familiar with the language. What typically happens though is that there's not smooth handoff from the prison. So when people come out, that we'll try to give them treatment or give them programming that they already had, or that they have to they're not well versed in or starting over. So I think if we start programming better in prisons, when they come out, we can do the aftercare part. And I think that's what we're missing. That's why I worked closely with the Bureau of Prisons for pre-release to find out what services they had. So when you're talking about evidence-based, I always took a look at what other people are doing and try to bring it back to tailor it to our population. Um, Oftentimes in this business, people are reactionary. In that business, they're reactionary, and they're moved by what politicians say, right? If politicians, this is the flavor of the month, sometimes you have to stay your course, and then what you do is you continue to shift and change based on the flavor of the moment. But to measure something, you have to give it a chance to see if it works or not. And you have to not be afraid to benchmark, not steal, but benchmark and tweak it as you go along. There's no, if there was a science, I'd be rich. If I could tell you I had a genie in a bottle and rub it, I'd be rich. But you have to be able to make adjustments on the fly.
So what does community safety mean from a federal perspective?
It used to mean when it came to probationers and all those things, giving the attention to those who are the highest of the high risk, right? Because what the research shows, if you treat low-level offenders like high-level offenders, you're going to find more stuff and they're going to recidivate. So the key is you have to find out who are the worst of the worst and how do you quantify or identify those individuals. Because if everybody's high risk, no one's high risk, right? And you have to put those resources into that population to try to drive down the violence. Now, if you don't do that and you're overwhelming probation officers with high caseloads, they can't focus on the highest of the high because everything's a fire that they're trying to put out. So you have to first start by identifying who are those that are more likely to recidivate or commit violence in the community. We know part of that is what? Age, right? We know oftentimes as people age out, they don't commit as much violence. So if you're young, right. But you also can't get to the point where you're simply stereotyping and saying all people between 18 and 25 are going to be treated as high risk, because that doesn't work either, because we're taking some people who are low level and putting more restrictions on them than they need to have.
Well, so I mean, now this is me. I don't really know. So this is why I'm about to ask you this question. You mean to tell me that there are levels on prisoners?
Yes, there are levels on people on supervision, and there's levels in prisons too. They're high risk, high level. You have lower risk people. You have medium risk, and what you do is you have what we call auto screeners or screeners, and they're indicators about what likelihood of people to recidivate. Right? They take based on their past criminal history, their age, access to guns, and all those things, and then a score is kicked out or a level is kicked out. You have the highest level, which means the most contacts we do. Then you have the next lower level, and you have the minimum people and all those things. So yes, there are levels.
Let's move over to your military service and your veteran experience. So what inspired you to serve in both the Army and the Air Force?
That was out of survival. I was in the Army first during the first Gulf War. I remember we slept like near tanks outside, dug foxholes. And I looked over to my left and right, and I saw Air Force people there with air conditioned tents and portable showers. And I said, I'm doing something wrong. I'm getting the same money as them. and they're in the field here, and they living a lot better than me. So after 11 years in the Army, I found a position in the Air Force Air Terminal Operations, in charge of stuff on the flight line and transfer. So my last deployment was in 2004. Went to the Middle East. I had my air conditioned tent with a TV in it, a shower every day. So what made me change was I saw how people were treated differently from the Army and Air Force, and I said, we're making the same money. Why not go over here and do something different?
Well, look, I don't even consider the Air Force a branch. That's a cake branch.
Hey, that's all right though. I left the Army thing.
Well, I was in the Navy.
Okay, my niece is in the Navy right now. She's down in Georgia.
So, but I mean, I will say this: the Air Force treat their people right.
They do. Really they call you customers. You're talking about your education. Any credits you get, you can be transferred to college credits and things of that nature. My military experience to me was actually, like I told you earlier, was my lifesaver, to be honest with you. it gave me a different perspective on life and what was really out there, and what that the world was bigger than the hustle and bustling of and poverty of where I came from. The Air Force, when I suffer PTSD right now, diagnosed, and I'm not scared to share that from deployments. And when I was in garrison, you know what garrison, like back at stateside, I was the ramp controller of 8 air terminal operations, where during the height of bringing human remains back, I remember getting calls in air terminal operations that says, what they say, it says non-viewable portions, private or PFC so-and-so, and their date of birth. And I looked at their date of birth, and the age was like 18 or 19 years old. Non-viewable portion means their body was blown up to the point where they had non-viewable portions in the transfer case. My job at that time was calling all quiet on the flight line, greeting the plane, walking on the plane before anyone got on to do inventory of stuff, and waiting for the dignified transfer of remains from the different branches of the service. Remember stepping on airplanes with red liquid leaking out because they don't embalm you over there. They bring you back and pack you in ice so that red tint is blood in the water. So that part of the military I took seriously because young people were sacrificing their life. Remember this, I used to see in ATOP when young people loaded on the plane to go to war, and their bright eye and bushy tail, and then I saw them come back after their first tour, and their faces gone and their eyes are sunk in because that 1,000-mile stare, that what some of the stuff they've seen in combat. So I again, I don't regret doing anything, but it does take a toll on young men and women for protracted wars. My whole military career, I went in the military in the late 80s, and I just remember we were at war almost the whole time I was in the military. Either in the first Gulf War when Iraq went to Kuwait, and then
that was Clinton. That was
yeah,
under Clinton.
yep. Then you went on to the next war, and the next war to Afghanistan. So my whole 20+ year career, I didn't know micro of not being in high op tempo and being at war.
Oh wow, yeah. So your PTSD level is very, very high.
Yes, but I was able to function. But I can tell you this: the warrior mentality told me that I was fine, but my wife said, "No, you're starling in your sleep. You're
Oh
doing this,
wow.
you're doing that, you have a problem sleeping." And I don't know. And I was scared, to be honest with you, to even say something about it early on in my career, because how would that impact me carrying a weapon in my law enforcement job? How would it impact me? You
They
get it,
wouldn't
right?
let you. They wouldn't let you.
So it just got to the point where my wife was like, "Honey, you need to go get checked." And I'm glad I did, because now I have a better quality of life. The hypervigilance, always ready, set, go, right? So I'm glad that, and I say that to say, not for anyone to feel sorry for me, but if you have family members who've seen combat, who went through something like that, please talk to them about at least getting an evaluation and getting seen by somebody.
Well, I'm telling you, what you're saying is absolutely true, and I hope that people. Well, see, a lot of people. I'm going to say this because I think things happen in a different way, and I think when people see veterans, the first thing they say is, you crazy or you different, and all this other kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's because when you actually go in and you learn this structure and this discipline and
Yes.
this way in which to live,
Yes,
which is high impacted, vice being out here in the civilian public population, where you're just living your life, everything is fine, and you can do whatever you want to, but you're not thinking about what's next.
right.
It just happens and you are reactionary.
Yes,
We had to be both reactionary and
prepare.
action.
Right. We
Yes.
have to do that. Yes, and I think, and that's what I don't think a lot of people understand. But I had to go and get what I needed, because I wasn't showing up the best way I could for my people. Right. And that's
Right.
that inner reflection, inner mastery. Because I can pretend all I want, but if I'm not showing up the way I need to for my people, I need to make sure I'm looking at myself in the mirror, going, "What can I do to make this thing better?" And I wasn't, because I know sometimes I was short with people and all those things. Again, I'm not telling you theory stuff. I'm telling you that what I had to go through to ensure that I had the relationship with my people. So when we went down range, that I didn't have to worry about how they will respond. I remember leaving the desert, my last deployment. You went into this tent. They had a psychiatrist there, and they walk out the back, said, "Do you see anything to make you have nightmares and all this stuff?" And most people said no. You know why they said no?
Wow.
They said yes, you couldn't go home. You had to go to Landstuhl, Germany to get medical care. Most
Oh,
people
Lord.
are home for 6 months plus, and they ready to get home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing the VA can do better. Also, to be honest with you, because it's hard out there for people who don't have family members looking out for them.
Yeah.
I'm good now. Let's not get. I'm good now. I'm not telling you the sob story. I'm telling you simply because when I talk in leadership, when I talk in this stuff, like treating under pressure, that's the kind of pressure I'm talking about, not inside of theory.
No, I mean, I don't see that as bad. What I see is, again, like I said to you, I really do mean that, is that you are more than just a resilient individual. You had to have persistence to keep going and to get to this point, which means you put in an enormous amount of work.
Self-work.
The work you put in, I guarantee you, 2 or 3 people couldn't put in the work that you did.
Yeah. I mean, it was rough. It was rough, but guess what?
Yeah.
Guess what? Now it's my job to pour into other people because I have those experiences. I don't think anything in life is never. I don't believe anything is ever wasted, right? If you want it to be, because life. The problem with a lot of people is life and experiences are a good teacher, but most people don't want to take the lesson.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about your violence prevention and intervention. What sparked your passion for violence prevention?
Again, my aunt was killed by her boyfriend. I remember cutting my cousin's hair, who was her son. He was living with us at the time, and the phone rang, and my father answered the phone, and I overheard him say, "Your aunt, your sister Rebecca is in the snow dead." So we go down there, and I being a young kid, I told my cousin, I said, "Man, somebody said your mom is dead." And then other family members who were involved in domestic violence. I got some people now that are involved in it. I wish they weren't. Again, I saw someone die in my grandmother's floor. And those things impact you. When I had my mother's house shot up, those things impact me to the point where it has to be a different way out. And I think most people are reactive. They see the symptoms, but they don't treat what happens. And I saw a void in that part of it, right? I saw a void, like I said earlier, that the police would show up, do the evidence, do the investigation, but never talk about the trauma suffered by the individuals who were impacted by it. And especially the young people who have to witness it every day. So the violence thing is close to my heart because it touched me personally.
So when it comes to violence prevention, can you tell us how do you define evidence-based intervention?
Okay, evidence-based is, to me, through trial and error. Other people have tried it because nothing is hardly ever new under the sun. And I go and look around the country and go, what is working, right? For example, the young mayor in Baltimore City is driving crime down. I don't care what people say. I don't care what the president say or anybody else.
Yes.
The numbers speak for itself. This young man is driving down crime. And I'm going to tell you now, the misconception that people have, and this is not a knock on police, not a knock on law enforcement, that we can arrest our way out of this. We cannot. Hear me again. We incarcerate more people than any civilized country in the world.
Yes.
And we still have one of the highest violent crime rate, mass shootings and all those things.
Yes, that's because the real criminals aren't being locked up.
Huh?
That's because the real criminals aren't being locked up.
No, we lock up a lot of people, real criminals and everything. But what I'm saying is we fill prisons up year after year for decades. That has not proven to work. But what works is what people like Brandon, the kid in Baltimore, is doing. he's merging the law enforcement piece with reentry pieces, with community work and rehabilitation stuff and restorative justice, all those things combined. But what we typically do see, we see states throw a lot of money into police and law enforcement, forget about the other parts of it, right? Early intervention and prevention in schools and all those things. And also, there's a study out there. I've seen a study during graduate school that a Montreal in Canada, a small place in Canada, is about the same size as Chicago. Less police, but less violence.
Mm.
That's not a knock on police. What that says is when you do the evidence-based stuff, you know what evidence shows? That because they have health care, people can get free health care, they can get the mental health help they need to address those mental health issues that lead to the violence that triggers people to get shot here. The access over infiltration of guns. You can say it, people can say it's not true. We have gun freedoms, but people talk about suing China for fentanyl, right?
Oh Lord. Oh
but China,
Lord.
but listen to this. Most of the mass shootings in New Mexico with the cartels are done with guns from America.
Well, you did look that's not rocket science. That's just factually based. Yeah.
But people don't want to see that part of it. So when I'm talking about evidence, I take a look at people like what Brandon, the gentleman in Baltimore, is on, where you see people can say, "Oh, crime is all-time high." It's not. I've been in law enforcement a long time, like I said, and I can tell you over decades, violent crime has been on the decline for a long time. A long time. And it's not because we arrest our way out of it. It's not because we incarcerate our way out of it. It's because we have a lot of people in the communities that are rolling their sleeves up like myself, going into communities and educating on violence prevention and intervention. One big hole I think in this country is churches. I think churches are ripe for the wrong person to go in there and try to rob them during collection time. Because most churches, they're starting to do it now, are starting to have security, and they're starting to use protocol about locking the doors at a certain time. If you ask people you go to a church like I have and say, what do you do if you get someone coming with a gun? People are going to scatter all over the place versus trying to find something to hide behind, a hardened place to hide behind. So that's the kind of education I do when I work with churches and places of worship. They're what we call soft targets.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, that young mayor that's over in Baltimore that's doing such a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned some of the things that he was doing in order to that's actually driving crime down. So when you look at the whole DMV, because crime was down all around those places, are they all doing pretty much that same thing to really change that situation? Or what kind of formula really are they using?
They're using
that's actually bringing this to light.
They're using a myriad of things, and most of it is the evidence-based stuff that you talked about, right? Baltimore and DC, if you know the proximity of them.
Yes.
DC has MORCA. The mayor's also returning citizens. They help people come back to the community. They help them with jobs. They help them a whole litany of other things they need. There's challenges when you come out of prison, right? You got a prison record. How do you get a job? One agency that I used to work for even started a program where ex-offenders could get a job with the federal government, low pay, but it got them the work experience they needed to go out somewhere else to do it. So there are things like that people can do. Certainly, they have a screening process, and you do want the most violent people off the street. But most people think you should lock people up forever. 95% of people who go to jail, not 98, come back to the streets. They don't go forever. How they come back is up to society, right? If you believe we shouldn't do anything in prison and let's let people languish and do nothing, they're going to come out worse than they were when they went in, because prison is a different animal. You talk about PTSD and war. You imagine a young going to prison, right? Could you imagine being an 18-year-old going to penitentiary for the first time?
Oh my God!
Penitentiary first time. You do 15 to 20 years, you come out. So what kind of person do you want to come back to the society as a citizen, right? So then you got people. Today I teach too at a university, criminal law. Today in my lesson we talked about it's a punishment, and I asked the students the question: we're talking about fines. You know how people get arrested for not paying fines, and dads go to jail for not paying child support. They get their license taken away and all those things. Again, everybody should pay child support. I'm not liberal like that. Don't get me wrong. I'm a gun owner and all that stuff. But we have to be smart. We have to be smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that a person that don't pay child support, you take them to jail and take their license, is better able to pay the child support or worse?
But now, let me tell you something, Lorenzo. When you say that, I've said this a while ago when I was a federal employee, and being an investigator and having to go out and investigate companies. The one thing that I thought was the most asinine thing you could ever see is that what you just mentioned. There were some of these guys at some of these places had like 2 and 3, maybe sometimes 4 child support orders, right?
Yep.
So now I'm thinking, if he's got that many orders and you guys are actually enforcing that, is he really making enough money? But the point to make as to what you just said is that no, that does not make them a productive citizen, because once they find out that these folk have found out where they are, now they're running again like they are really, really criminals.
And if you put them in jail and take their license, you make it more difficult to get a job to provide. Again,
exactly.
Community service, some other things you can do. I'm just trying to make, again, if you put someone in jail, you have to understand how much it costs to incarcerate someone every day.
Right.
If you put an indigent person in jail for not paying fines or whatever the case may be, and you set their bill at $200, it may not be excessive to some, but for that one person, it may be excessive, right? So you're going to incarcerate a person for $1,000 fine, and you're going to pay somewhere around $30-some thousand a year because what? How does it make sense to you as a taxpayer?
That don't. But
in my neighborhood back in the day, they called it hustling backwards.
I tell you, the day the state of Michigan, they got that they got that system on pat on down pat. I can tell you that. If they want to find you, they know how to find you, and they send the folk all across the different state lines to come get you.
Again, I'm not being liberal about it. I'm just saying we have to get smarter as it relates to crime and who we incarcerate, because it makes no earthly sense to me to incarcerate somebody for a $1,500 or even 20 if we're gonna pay $30,000 a year to incarcerate them. And I'm not talking about, and then people may think it's hyperbole. It's not. By the time you pay correctional officers, overtime, food, laundry, medical care, medication, court and transportation, all those things, it averages somewhere around $30,000+ a year.
That was my premise. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Your tax ain't just money. They ain't growing a tree. It's your tax dollars.
Yeah. So we also spoke about, we do Black History 365. And I asked you who was the most influential person in your life and career, and you told me it was Colin Powell.
Colin Powell.
And so can you tell us, why is Colin Powell the most influential figure in your leadership journey?
I had a privilege to meet him at one point, and it's just his presence. And once you, I have his book here too. Once you read his story, and once you see where this man carried himself, even downrange in wartime, you can't help but be inspired. And I often look at the time he entered the military as a young military officer, the odds and obstacles he had to face to reach the highest level of the 4-star general that he was. Never compromised in his integrity. Never stepped on anyone to get there. Came over as a child of immigrants. His parents were immigrants to this great nation. And the fact that it didn't break him, and he was able to continue to pour into young officers and not miss a beat when it engaged in young troops downrange, to me, he inspired me to go, if he during that time can be the best he could be and still wear that country's flag on his sleeve, we can do it too. I just admire a person so much like that. who was treated like a second-class citizen, but still was willing and able to go down range and do that, and didn't lose himself in that through bitterness and hate.
So, what lessons from Powell's life resonate most deeply with you?
From his life was, again, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. He came over to parents, working class parents, to New York City, to New York. They were working class. He didn't give up. During the time when he went into military, young officers, black officers were not prevalent. They didn't get the credit that they deserved. He went to Vietnam. It's just his don't quit attitude. His attitude that he had every opportunity to lay down and go, I won't get a fair shake, but he didn't do that. He kept his persistence and resiliency, and that's what I take mine after. Because, again, I would say at this time in the military, not perfect, but we have a better chance than he did when he came along. Let me say that.
How did his example shape your approach to service and integrity?
His leadership style. His leadership style. His leadership, that he never thought he was too big for the people. And you often found him around his troops and people, even in the Middle East. He would visit people. He would talk to people. He never was, sometimes you got people who reach a certain level that they don't want to talk to the commoners. They tell a message to somebody else who tells someone else. That was never what I got from General Powell.
So, what aspects of his leadership philosophy do you carry into your work?
Leading from the front. Leading from the front. You can be up in a penthouse all you want to, but if you ask my people when I was working, I was always among the people. I was always engaging people. I didn't sit in the ivory tower. So how could you always walking around? Because it was my responsibility to learn the pulse of what was going on there. If I didn't know, I should have known. So I made sure I talked to people. I made sure I was leading from the front. It wasn't above me to put my vest on and go out to the field with people and engage people. It wasn't above me to go to the lobby and calm down an irate person. It wasn't above me to go to the cell block and talk. It wasn't above me to go to a prison as a chief out in North Carolina to go and even talk to returning citizens, right? But I didn't have to. When another thing I got, my wife often said, honey, when it's snowing, like when the weather's bad, why'd you leave Delaware? Remember, Delaware is a couple hours, hour and a half from DC.
Yep.
Northeastern. Why'd you go to work? Why are you going to work today? I said, because I got to leave from the front. If I'm not willing to make a sacrifice to come, why should my people?
I used to live in DC.
Okay, then. And that traffic, it used to take me 30 plus minutes to get out of DC to get to Route 50 just to get on the highway and start driving an hour plus home.
That's if you was driving. Better get that train.
Well, I was driving because when I became a chief, our hours were the same, but we also had meetings throughout the city, and it added more stress to me to be on the train. And then my PTSD kept me too hypervigilant on public transportation around people that I needed to drive.
So how do you hope to honor his legacy through your own leadership?
Through taking some of those principles that I learned from him and through his life, and impact them upon not just organizations, but communities, churches, and in individuals' lives. That's what I hope to do. Honor his legacy. Leadership is a game changer. Self-mastery and leadership.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to give to our audience? Tell them how they can connect with you via your social media, your website links, how they can get your book, all of those good things.
All right. Lorenzo Hopkins, Northstar Consulting 365.com. That is my website. You can email me at northstarcllc@gmail.com. And you can get my book from Amazon, From Ordinary to Extraordinary, 4 Pillars of Culture Change and Leadership by Mr. Lorenzo G. Hopkins, Master of Science. The parting words I would tell you is that don't ever sell yourself short, because a poor boy like me can make it from where I came from with no money for college. You can too. And there's someone out there. If you don't think you can, please find somebody to mentor you, to advise you, because there are people out there who are willing to help if you're willing to learn. Don't shy away from no's. I use my no's to propel me into greatness because every time I was told no, I became more determined to succeed. Lastly, people's opinions of you only matter if you allow it to. Don't set limits on yourself, and don't let anybody else set limits on you either.
Well, I'm going to, but before I close, I just want to ask you, after I finish reading this monologue, can you stick around for a couple of minutes?
Yes, sir.
First, I want to say I want to thank you for being here, because I really appreciate this conversation, and there's a whole lot more, and we definitely need to have you back. And I want to thank everyone that has watched and are watching at this point. And for all of you that are watching on any of our 8 streaming channels, especially if it's our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled all notifications, I ask if you would please support us by subscribing and enabling all notifications, where you're able to get all the shows live when we first go live, and you're able to go back and catch all of our other shows, where you can learn the many things that all of our guests have left for us to understand and how we should grow our communities. So in closing, I'm going to close with this monologue. Tonight's conversation reminds us that leadership is not a title, it is a responsibility. Lorenzo G. Hopkins has lived a life defined by service, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that communities can be safer, stronger, and more resilient when leaders choose courage over comfort. From the battlefield to the federal service, from high-risk environments to coaching rooms, his journey teaches us that transformation begins with discipline, compassion, and a commitment to truth. His work is a reminder that leadership is not about power, it is about purpose. It is about lifting others. It is about creating change without the change that outlives us. Mr. Hopkins, thank you for your service, your wisdom, and your dedication to building a better world. And to our audience, thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of America in Black and White. Good night, and keep leading with purpose. I'm your host, Charles King, and we will see you guys tomorrow.